Thanks for coming. This is the third weekly Women in Live Music webinar. Thank you for joining us. For those who don't know who we are, we're a small, well, we're actually quite big these days, a European community non-profit organisation that was founded in January 2018, basically because women only make up quite a small percentage of the music industry. We think between about 5 and 10%. We believe in diversity and that the music industry is a place for everyone. So we started this organisation to grow a positive community and share our knowledge, skills, opportunities, and to try and equalise the gender balance in the years to come. So yeah, despite being called Women in Live Music, we don't exclude anyone from any of our workshops or events or communities, even things like this. So we welcome all of our male supporters out there, and particularly today, Alex Cerutti, who's been a really valuable supporter pretty much since day one. So thank you very much for doing this for us. Yeah, please type any questions you have in the chat. This webinar is aimed at all levels, so if you're a newcomer or you're experienced, please ask whatever you want to ask. There's no judgment here. I'm sure we're all going to learn a lot today, myself included. So now I'd like to introduce Alex, who is the current monitor engineer for who I think is probably UK's one of the biggest pop stars in the UK at the moment, Dua Lipa. So yeah, is she still #1? I don't know.
I don't know. I know her album's been at #1 for a few weeks. Whether it is still, not sure.
I don't know, but yeah, she's done very well. So yeah, let's start off with a little bit about you, who you are, kind of where you started from, and how you got to where you are now.
All right. So I'm originally from Hull in Yorkshire. I, through like school and college, played trumpet and bass guitar and kind of started recording mates' bands and that kind of thing. That's kind of how I got myself into audio and music. When we left college, like the summer after I was kind of 18, 19, basically I walked into a shop that sold music stuff and the guy was like, "Can you help me on Saturday night and load a van for me?" I had no idea what he was talking about, but it was money and I was poor. And it was into music, so I went and did that, and basically ended up over the next kind of 4 or 5 years working for him and a couple of other like tiny PA companies, kind of 24-channel analog desks, a couple of speakers, sub, 3 wedge mixes from front of house type of vibe in Hull. And I did that for 5-6 years, including some really bizarre gigs. Like I did a lot of the fun runs for Cancer Research UK. So like I drive around the country in a van with a couple of speakers, wireless microphone, small desk, kind of just doing their kind of announcements. Well, I wasn't doing it, but making somebody loud enough for their announcements and all that kind of thing. Then about 2008, me and my now wife moved to London, and I basically rang up every PA company in London repeatedly every Monday morning for about 6 months whilst working, doing local crewing, and eventually started working for Britannia Road Productions. Kind of like, I moved here in like November, so kind of beginning of the summer, May, June time. Spent a couple of years in their warehouse, randomly going out on gigs whenever there was, basically when nobody else was left. So I'd end up doing it. Everything from kind of patch to flying PA to system tech into front of mixing front of house, mixing monitors, and everything in between. And then did a bit of touring with various bands, both for Brit Row and both for the artists themselves. And then I spent 2 years as the crew chief in the Roundhouse, which was really good. After that, I ended up randomly getting mixing monitors for Heim, which was really good fun for about 8 months, a year, and then kind of picked up gigs for Brit Row, mixing gigs, did a bit of work for Scan, various other people. And then I ended up mixing monitors for Lana Del Rey. Which I've done kind of, a week here, a week there, off and on since 2015. She's got the same management as Dua, which is how I ended up working for Dua. And now we're here,
Great.
Our own houses.
Well, so you've got quite a lot of experience under your belt, starting off doing the small stuff and then kind of working your way up, I suppose, to where you are now, which is, probably one of the biggest kind of gigs you can get as a monitor engineer, I suppose, when you're doing big pop stadium stuff. Is arenas actually?
The tour, this album tour will be arenas, like baby arenas to big normal, like the O2 in London and everything below. But yeah, basically arenas everywhere.
Great. Quite a strange question to start with, but one that was actually kind of influenced by a question we had in our last webinar, or the one before actually, was that someone asked if it was necessary to move to London to be able to break into this kind of top layer of the industry. Do you think it's kind of necessary for you in your career that you move to London to kind of make it?
I mean, so for my personal reasons me and my partner wanted to leave Hull, and we kind of tossed around ideas of different cities, and we kind of came with like Manchester or London because for the variety of both the work that we do, and it was her decision to move to London. Basically, it wasn't really led by me because there's Wigwam and a number of kind of medium-sized VA companies in Manchester. So there's this work in other cities. I think it's easier to get a certain level of work in London, because there's loads of VA companies here. There's loads of venues. There's always local crewing work. So I think you can hedge your bets that you will get more work in London. I don't think it's necessary to be here to get to a certain point. I think it might make life easier, but I don't think it's necessary.
That's a great answer. Yeah, I totally agree with that. So you haven't always just done monitors. You've been, as you say, doing a variety of things from crew bossing to front of house and even RF stuff. Do you think that perhaps you have a certain skill set that makes you a good monitor engineer, or is there a reason that you chose monitors as opposed to, say, system tech or front of house?
Yeah, so I prefer mixing monitors to mixing front of house. I just find it more fun. It's like a total personal preference thing. I don't think I'd put myself out as a front of house engineer for a tour. I mean, like if you rang me up, I'd totally cover you for a Saturday night, but I won't go out and tour as a front of house engineer just because I don't like. It just doesn't interest me as much. I think it's really good fun being on stage. It's kind of much more of a vibe. But for the other stuff that you can do as an audio engineer, I don't mind. Like, I haven't been a system tech in a while, but that's just because I've been busy mixing monitors. It's not because I don't or wouldn't go and fly PA anymore. I think it makes you a better monitor engineer or front of house engineer if you know how to do other things. And like crew bossing for PA companies or whatever, just it's good for your interpersonal skills. It's good for how you treat artists and management and production managers and all the people that you need to get on with. And like as a crew boss, you're representing your company, but you're also representing your crew, and you need to be good at arguing your point of view, basically. And I think that makes you a better monitor engineer and kind of a better person as well, because you get to be good at talking to people, which essentially is a large proportion of our jobs.
That brings me kind of nicely onto my next question, which is, what do you think are good skills to have as a monitor engineer?
If we exclude audio engineering, whilst there is obviously details that you need to be good at as a monitor engineer over anything else, patience is something that I think everybody probably could do with it, but patience and understanding, because it's easy when you see somebody being maybe less than courteous to just be like, well, they're not very nice. Whereas you need to see life from their position. Yeah, I can totally understand how if something goes wrong and it's your name on the ticket and you're standing there in front of 20,000 people, you're going to be angry that you're going to point blame at somebody. Whether they're right or wrong, I think it's always better to kind of show your game face, deal with it, and be patient, basically, because rushing out and doing silly things is not good for anybody, and it's not good for you in general. So yeah, patience, and not being afraid to ask for help when you need it, because like one of the main reasons I still try and work as much as possible as an audio tech is because I like babysitting really good engineers, because you just get to watch people who are really good at their job be really good at a job and learn loads of stuff from them. And like, if you can't ask for help, you're going to be quite stuffed at some point. So yeah, other than that, I don't know, it's like having kids has made me a much better monitor engineer, because I'm far more patient with people. You know, it's daft, but it's true. Learning how to not do everything yourself, I've found quite challenging over the last few years. Like, you know, it's like I've got a really good RF tech that I will be doing the next tour with. And it's like really, because I've spent my whole professional life doing my own RF or being an RF tech, it's really hard to step back and just let them do their job. And that's a skill that I think not many people have, especially when you've done similar roles. So yeah, learning not to just control everything is I found quite difficult, but it's a good skill to have when you can get there.
Wow, that's a really in-depth answer. Thank you. So yeah, you talk about empathy as being an important quality, which I really agree with. How do you deal with when things go wrong? I know you've worked with some strong female artists, let's say. I'm not going to call them divas, but I'm sure there's a lot of strong personalities there. Is there any kind of skills or what's the way to say it? So kind of like, how do you deal when things go wrong, and how do you deal with stress?
Okay, so yeah, divas is not the right word, like it, because it, like there's always going to be people that are like that, but like yeah, I don't think it's a good word to use. Anyway, so when things break, like stuff breaks, and like it just does, so you need to accept that and you need to be able to move on. And when the artist you're working, when it's like, I don't know, if your desk crashed, for example, I just walk up to them and go, desk crashed, sorry, give me 5 minutes, I'll come get you. I'll get my stage manager to come get you, and we'll move on, because there is nothing you can do about that. When you make a mistake, own up to it. And I think that one of the big things between as being a monitor engineer, if your artist doesn't trust you, you're already fired. So being honest with them from the start is really important. And it doesn't mean to say you have to give your opinion all the time. It just means that when they ask you a question, you should be honest, because you can't have trust with somebody if you're not honest with them. Yeah, it's honesty and understanding that stuff breaks and nothing's going to be 100% all of the time. And you know, there's some places where it probably should be close to 100% fine all the time, and there's some places around the world where it's just not going to be, and it shouldn't be expected. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great answer. So tell me a little bit about the workflow of like a typical day on tour for you.
So if I'm doing RF, I'll go in and I've got a couple of RF scanners. I'll do And like a relatively early morning, like kind of 9 o'clock, when nothing's turned on in a venue, scan. So that I've got a picture of what essentially the world looks like without our influence. As I say, if we're just presuming that I'm doing this with gear from a PA company rather than just walking into a venue that I'm using all of their gear, obviously I'll set it up. Usually, as long as it's obviously not like the beginning of a tour, if I'm already on tour, I will usually have a little listen to last night's show. So I multi-track all the shows I do, and then so I can virtual sound check in the morning. Maybe not to do anything particularly, it might just be to have a listen to it and see how it was, to see if it's worth using last night's show file or not. Sometimes it's just not worth keeping. You know, I have a bad day, band don't play particularly well, whatever. Sometimes it's just like, you know what, I made too many bad choices or did things because the venue sounded awful, you know. So make the choice of where I'm going to use that show file. Yeah, just generally make sure everything's working and in place and neat and tidy and ready for the band. If I've not got gear and I'm just walking in and using house stuff, I will go in and offer whoever the house people are a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and get talking to them earlier than later, just so that it can all be done in a really casual time frame, so nobody's stressed. Or, you know, if something's not right, you can get it done at 9 o'clock in the morning rather than at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when you've got a band in an hour. Because as I say, like I said earlier, it's like stuff breaks, and I've walked into venues and their desks didn't turn on, and if I hadn't have gone in at a sensible time in the morning, I would have been stuffed. So it's kind of just about giving yourself as much time in the day to do the things that you know you need to do, because you know at 4 o'clock in the afternoon you're going to have a band sound check-in, and there's no real excuse unless the whole world's collapsing for you not to be able to do that. Obviously, some of this can be done beforehand through advancing and making sure that everybody knows what's going on. But yeah, on a day-to-day level, just making sure everything is there. And if you do have problems, which you will do, you can speak to your PA provider or speak to the production manager and get stuff fixed or replaced.
Okay. And is there anything that you find that you need to be doing between shows, kind of homework type of thing? So, for example, listening back to multi-tracks or preparing for the next day on tour?
Yeah, sometimes it depends what, like, it kind of depends on how far into a tour you are, because, like, I've worked with artists who, like, I started an album campaign with, they've released an album, and then like every 3 or 4 months I'll release a new a new song that's not on that album. So it's kind of, I always like to make sure that I know what they left the studio listening to, as it were, like the song that's been released to the public, so I know what that sounds like in advance of having to mix it, just as a useful reference. So yeah, sometimes, say, it depends on, like, I spend a lot, like during the summer I'll spend every, you know, days off just going over advances that have come in for festivals, or like, especially if I'm not carrying my own gear, right, making sure that, you know, different festivals have got at least something that's workable. And, you know, so, you know, like when you're going through the like really busy summers where you're kind of loading out of the festival at 4 o'clock in the morning, going straight to an airport to get on a flight to another country to load in, it's better to have done that in a hotel the day before than trying to think on your feet when you've had an hour's sleep. Yeah, using your time wisely, basically. Yeah, that's about it. That, and try and find somewhere nice to eat on a day off.
Yeah, it's good to relax as well. You can't be working all the time.
Yeah,
let's talk tools. What tools do you think are important to bring? Do you have any special equipment in your tool case that you can't live without?
I've got an RF scanner, which I almost always have with me. I've got one by a company called Signal Hound, which is it's basically a hardware software thing, so you can plug it into a laptop and it uses your laptop. Well, the hardware is the RF bit, and you can save stuff. Cue boxes are really useful. Just a little box with a speaker in it. As I know you know, but in general, it's like you can plug XLR cable, bits and pieces to test lines. That's kind of headphones, because I mix in-ear monitors, so I've got 2 or 3 pairs of in-ear monitors, some spare cables, some cleaning products to clean microphones and in-ears. Let's see. Yeah, that's about it. Like, I mean, if I'm teching, like, I'll have a toolbox with me, like a small Pally or whatever, but it's kind of like a soldering iron, good set of screwdrivers, a good multimeter. Always have a good multimeter with me, because there's nothing like destroying all of the gear you've got by plugging it into something where the power's not particularly good. Yeah, it's probably about it. A bit rambly, sorry, but
no, it's fine. I'm taking notes. My multimeter sucks, so I think I'm going to definitely invest in a good one. I want to talk a little bit about the main artist you're working for at the moment, Dua Lipa. Is her and the band all on ears, or do you use ears and wedges?
So I'm of the opinion that if you've got in-ears, then you don't need wedges. If you want to use wedges, that's fine, but it shouldn't be a case that you need both. I will sometimes put subs on stage to add a little bit of low end onto the stage, so to give a little bit of feeling, but I haven't mixed wedges in 5 years, maybe, I think. Like, as I say, like, for recently, like the drummer, I'll put a sub on, or a butt kicker, like a chair with a speaker attached to it, basically. And so maybe put a couple of subs either side, like side fills, but with no tops. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, if you've got bits of plastic blocking your ears, you don't need HDF drivers in wedges. You're just asking for trouble. So like current bands is like 9 people, a load of BVs, guitars, bass, drums, keyboard player. Everyone's on ears. Got a load of dancers as well. They're all on ears. So that as I say, like, just pop music in general, like the way that people are designing pop shows these days, they want to be able to sell all the way around, so everybody can see clear sight lines. So having like massive side fills and all the rest of it on stage is just not acceptable in the eyes of a lot of production managers that work for, the likes of Gaga and Katy Perry and all that. Like, if you look at their stages, they're really clean because people have come to see them. It's not like, like Liam Gallagher. Nobody cares if you can see a load of speakers on stage, because that's what you expect to see. So yeah, that's also a conscious choice about stuff like this. And to be fair, I don't like. There's a time and a place for wedges, but I don't think the vast majority of musicians and bands should be on wedges. I think there's a definite like types of music that it would suit, whereas in ears you can pretty much mix most things on, and you'll get a better result. The band will be better. In general, anyway. There's always exceptions to the rule.
Great. I want to talk a little bit more about in-ears, if that's okay. Firstly, what brand of in-ears do the band use?
So I really like JH Audio. So I've always pushed people to use them because I prefer them. Basically, I mean, most companies make good sets of ears now. There's like, certainly if you spend a reasonable amount of money, they're all good. Like UE stuff's really good, and there's a few other people that have come about and made some good sets of ears. But like speakers, like they all have different tonal qualities, and I've always liked Jerry's stuff. Like when he started UE audio, UE Ultimate Ears, and the stuff that he made for UE, I still like. I've still got some UE 7s and some UE 11s that I really like. But I just think JH's stuff suits what I want to hear better. But to be quite honest, I'd rather have somebody have the cheapest pair of custom ears than any generics, because the vast majority of what control you get from in ears is about the seal. So even if it's just a cheap pair of custom molded, at least they're custom molded, and then you're blocking out the sound that's coming off everything else. So what the person's hearing is reasonably close to what, sorry, that's my doorbell, to what you're sending from your desk. But yeah, I like Jerry's stuff. I think it's really good. And he was a monitor engineer, he should know.
Yeah, he was monitor engineer for Van Halen, if I'm correct. Yeah. He used to make the first in-ear monitors out of little sort of drivers that you get in pacemakers, I think. It's really fascinating history if you're into all that. So do you think it's important as a monitor engineer to have the same in-ears that everyone on stage is using? Or do you think you can get away with maybe using JH10s if your artist is on your UE 18s?
Yeah, you can totally get away with it. But it just comes down to communication with the person you're mixing for. Because I've got a couple of pairs of JH16s that I use as my kind of like, I'll use them if the band have got something else. And you can totally get away with it. It's not ideal, but I don't think it's easier to go, right, well, I know that's pretty much what they're getting if you're all in the same ears. Whereas various models, as I say, I've got like 4 or 5 different pairs, and they all sound different. And some of them, if you like picking extremes, some of them sound really different. But you can just be like, does this all sound a bit bright to you? Does it, you can communicate and work those things out if you've got the time. You can definitely get away with it. It's not ideal, but you can definitely get away with it and give good results. You just got to talk a bit more.
Great. Another question that I personally would like to ask is, have you ever gone through the experience of putting an artist on in-ears for the first time? So an artist who's only used wedges and then gone onto ears, and do you have any advice of how you would try to ease them into that process and build a sort of starting mix for them?
Yeah, so I've only done it like 2 or 3 times, some more successfully than others. Like some people just are more stubborn basically than others, and it just requires a little bit more work. It's all about communication and rehearsals. Expecting to get a group of musicians that have spent any amount of serious time on wedges onto in-ears, you're not going to be able to do that by dialing it in at a festival. It's just not going to happen. And you're going to give them a negative experience, or at least an average experience, because you're guessing they've no idea. So realistically, the only way to really do it is putting them in rehearsals for 2 weeks and going through stuff, because you can, like one band I worked for, they're all on wedges, management wanted them on ears, and like people like the drummer and the bass player were really easy to sort out. You'd leave their wedge mix up and just gradually turn them down over 15, 20 shows or whatever, to the point where their wedges have been off for weeks. And you keep putting them out because emotionally they know it's there, until you get to a point where you've just not used them for so long that you can have that conversation with them and just be like, there's no point these being here. They've not been on for weeks and you seem really happy, blah, blah, blah. Where there's other people that, for a variety of reasons, are just a little bit more difficult, which is where you need time in rehearsals, where you don't have the pressure of, being on stage performing and trying to work those kind of details out. It's not, as I say, like the majority of people that you get to mix these days will have not done much on wedges. It's just because, certainly not toured properly on wedges, because people just don't these days. like the last band I mixed on wedges, or that I transferred from wedges to ears, they're all my age. So I'm 36, and that's kind of the last group of people that would have toured properly for a while on wedges, because basically people can afford a set of decent in-ears now, and it's just expected, and you can get them at festivals and venues have them. So it's becoming less of a thing, but yeah, it can be difficult. As I say, if you don't have rehearsals, and they're really stuck in the way, it's nigh on impossible. You do need time to sit there in a quiet space and do it. So it's not something I particularly enjoy doing, put it that way.
Okay. That's great advice there, actually. I would now like to ask the fun questions that's about to start. So, can you recall your most challenging gig and why?
I don't know. It's weird because I consider that I've never had I don't really think I've had really bad experiences. There's a couple of shows, and it was one-offs, both of them.
It doesn't have to be bad. It can just be challenging.
Yeah. So the only two gigs I can think of that were just weird was, one was the Jackson 4, I guess. So the other Jackson brothers. And they go around performing at, I suppose they still do gigs, but they mainly do corporate events and stuff like that, singing Jackson 5 tunes. And they're notoriously difficult. And I thought I'd had an awful gig. The sound check was awful and the gig was awful. And their manager came up to me afterwards and was just I was really good. They were all really happy. And I was just but it was horrible. The whole 40 odd minutes, whatever, it was just I was just sweating because I just thought it was going horrible. And it's that kind of mind trick where you're just you just presume because of maybe what you've heard or, what's going on, that it's all going wrong and it's actually fine. And the other really weird gig I did was me and a friend of mine, years ago, when I was working for Brit Row full time. So I jumped around and did covered people's holidays in warehouse management, stuff like that. And it was when Amy Winehouse passed away, and they had a wake for her in Jazz After Dark in Soho. And 5 o'clock in the afternoon, me and my friend were sitting in the office, and my boss was can you go stick a couple of speakers and a mixing desk into Jazz After Dark and mix Amy's band for her wake? It's just weird. And it was cool because Amy Winehouse's stuff was amazing, but it was a really weird gig. As I'm sure you can imagine, the room was full of people who had known her for, it was a wake, but with a great band playing great music. So yeah, it was weird. If you've ever been to Jazz After Dark, it's tiny. It's like somebody's bedroom.
I haven't, no.
It's an old school jazz club with a corner stage which is big enough to put a drum kit in, and then the band standing in front of the stage. It's that kind of place. But yeah, but Amy's band was 12 beats or something.
Okay.
Weird. But.
Cool. So I'm waiting for everyone else to start asking questions, by the way, because otherwise it would just be me and Alex talking away. So please type your questions. I want to ask if there's any kind of obvious differences between mixing pop stuff. So you've done Katy and Lana Del Rey, and of course Dua Lipa, as you say. But you've also done Bullet for My Valentine. No, is that right? Bullet for My Valentine. Do you find there's obviously it's different genre of music, but do you find that there's a big difference in what pop people are asking for in their ears and say more metal and rock?
Honestly, no. I think, with the exception of exception of really specific musical things that are specific to that genre of music, for Bullet, essentially they're a metal band, but they're still a pop act. in that kind of like they are a poppy version of that genre, with the exception of like the EQ you'd put on a kick drum when you listen to metal. It's kind of very similar, you know. Like, I mean, I listened to a lot of metal and when I was a kid, and still do every now and then. And so maybe it's just like I knew it, so that was fine. But generally, I just kind of mix it how you want it to sound personally, and then work with what the artist says. But like, yeah, it's a lot of these bands are just pop versions of whatever genre, and that's probably why they're successful, because everybody likes, you know, the poppier side of whatever, be it hardcore punk or straight up pop. But like a lot of the pop acts I've mixed wanted really live bands. You know, like there's not a lot of track, or so like the guitars, the keys, and the drums are really prominent in their mixes because the artist wants to be whoever and band, rather than this is a video screen and a load of track and me singing over the top. I've never worked for one of those artists, so I can't really say. All of the pop stuff I've done has always been like band driven, so it sounded bandy, you know. And that's probably why everything I've mixed is basically I've done the same kind of things. As I say, with those little exceptions, like the kick drum in metal sounds really specific. I'm trying to think if there's anything really random in this. All right, yeah. I've never found myself doing anything weird, to put it that way. Okay. For specific musical genres. Nothing really weird anyway.
So we just had some questions come in. So I'm going to start on these. So we've got one who's asking if live mixing is a good learning ground for studio mixing and vice versa. Alex, I don't know if you have any studio experience.
Really? I mean, like, I've mixed my mates' bands when I was like 18. Like I'd record them and then mix them for them, but not professionally, no. But audio engineering is essentially audio engineering. I don't think either hurts. There's some very good live front of house mixers that have got good careers as studio mixers as well. I don't think it hurts, as long as you're aware of the task you've been given. There's no reason why the two can't complement each other. I mean, as I say, like obviously there's greater restrictions in live audio because of, you know, feedback and the sound of the room and etc. But yeah, no, I think both can complement each other, and you can certainly, like, I watch videos of good studio engineers on like YouTube to learn tricks. Like there's plenty of things you can steal, especially for in-ears, because the sound of the room is less important to what you're doing.
Okay. Are there any studio engineers you recommend that we can check out?
Yeah, Andrew Sheps, he's really good, and he's a really good teacher as well. Like videos he does, he's done loads of stuff with like Waves and some various other people. He's a good teacher, and I mean, his records sound really good. I like Rick Rubin's worth listening to. Who else is there? There's a number of, like, there's a thing called Mix with the Masters. I haven't got around to, I want to buy it actually, because it's like a subscription thing, but they've done loads of really good videos with really good engineers where they'll take you through how they mixed, you know, X song by X artist and what they did to create those sounds and stuff, which is just, yeah, it's interesting. And it's I don't think it's a bad thing to learn, even if you can't put it into your work. It's worth learning.
Yeah, 100%. And I know that some people find it a good exercise to get a multi-track and put it into, you know, whatever system they have on their computer, say Logic or Pro Tools, and just practice building mixes that way at home, which is something we can all be doing during this time.
I've been doing it, like, not just with the bands I'm working for now. Like, I've got old multi-tracks of all the bands I've worked with in the past that I'll just do just to practice mixing and just to try out some idea that I've had or I've read other people have been using. Because it's much better to do it in your kitchen without an audience, you know, than trying it for the first time in front of people.
Yeah.
What works, you know?
Totally agree. So Sanders asking, how do you run communication between you and artists on stage? Do you have a talkback system in place?
Yeah, so because you've got in-ears in, communication's hard, because I don't want people taking their in-ears out, because every time when you twist in-ears and push them in and take them out, you're essentially annoying your ear canal. And obviously this takes a load of time, but if you're constantly doing it, you're going to irritate your ear canal, which means you're going to take your ears out more. And especially in a loud environment, your hearing changes. Like if you've ever gone to a gig with earplugs in, listen to half the gig and then take them out, everything's really bright because you've been listening to music, earplugs in, so what you're hearing is dull, essentially. So I like to make sure that once you start sound check or whatever, people just leave their ears in, so everybody gets a microphone. And I'll always use foot switches because people have a habit of not turning switch mics off, and that'll irritate everybody. So everybody gets a foot switch and a talkback mic. And so I've mainly been using digital desks predominantly for the last however long. And they've got a function where you can, so I'll make up a bus of everybody's talkback mic. I'll send that bus to a matrix. I'll send my solo bus to a matrix, and then I'll sum them so that regardless of what I'm listening to, whether I'm soloing the kick drum channel or I'm soloing the drummer's mix or whatever, all of those shout mics will always go to my ears all of the time. So you can always hear them. And I like, sometimes I'll side chain the solo bus so it turns the solo bus down whenever somebody's talking as well. It's quite useful. I don't always do it, but a lot of the time I do. Because then you don't miss stuff. And even for like singers who are walking around, I'll find like a nice place that's in the dark where they can go like have some drinks or like a set list or whatever, and their microphone. So if they need, because it's not just me, and it's not just like this, people need to communicate about, they need, a towel, or like, we're going to not do this song, so we'll do this song instead, or we're going to, there's all sorts of things that need to be communicated with people that need to be done quickly, and people need to hear it. So it's just much easier just that everybody gets a shout mic and everybody can talk. One thing I should say though is that I make it so that everybody can hear each other during sound checks, and then during the show they can only talk to themselves, me and say backline techs or whatever, because nobody needs the bass player chatting about how his bass doesn't quite sound right when they're playing a song. It just puts people off. So I just make sure that nobody else in the band can hear each other during a show, because you don't want that, just annoys people, basically.
Okay, great. We've got a question here from Kevin, who's saying, on the first day of your rehearsal with artist/band, what's your process of setting initial mixes from the start?
So whether it's rehearsals or a festival, it doesn't matter basically. I will always create a show file. Like, I'll never walk up to a desk and just dial it. Like, it doesn't matter where you are in the world or essentially what desk you're working. There is always an offline editor that you can at least put names in, output names, turn EQs on. You don't need to put any EQ on, but like actually have it turned on. So what I do is I will get a channel list, write all the names out, all the outputs. I always put it's like stuff like that I know I'm going to do. So like I can put multi-band compressors on outputs, for example, and I know the frequencies that I want the crossovers and the multiple. So I'll do all of that stuff. It takes time, and you don't want to be doing it whilst you've got a room full of people. When you get to the point where you've got a room full of people, I will essentially pre-dial everybody's mixes in. So, and it never like ends up finished like this, but as a starting point, I will always put your instruments and your vocal at 0 on the send to the auxiliary, and then everything else at -10, so that when the band start, they can hear stuff. The little caveat to that is that when I'm line checking, everything's muted, and I'll gain it up without anybody hearing it. But as soon as I know it's not going to blow anybody's ears up, I'll just unmute it. Because then you get stop people going, oh, it's too quiet, my pack's not loud enough. All those kind of like paranoid little things that sometimes musicians do. So that essentially they could play a song, and yeah, it wouldn't be right, but you could play a song because everything's there. You can hear the click track, you can hear the keyboard player, you can hear the backing vocals. Because you know you're going to have to do this stuff, so you might as well do it beforehand. I'm not going to suggest that you can, unless you know the microphone and the instrument, you're never going to be able to guess EQ right. But the bass player is going to want a load of drums, and the guitarist is going to want something to time off and something to pitch with. You know, there's things that are going to have to happen, so you might as well do them beforehand. And what I find the good thing about doing this is that because essentially everything is at relatives to everything else, you can do your gain structure so that if you set all your faders at 0, it would sound like a mix because everything is relative to each other. So when you listen to the drummer, you turn the kick drum up, it's pretty much going to be right for the rest of the band how loud that kick drum is in their mix, because if the drummer can hear it a little bit louder, then it's probably good for everybody else. And it works when you're kind of a little bit further on into sound check or rehearsals, that you can get to that point where it's the bassist says, oh, like the bass is a little bit too quiet. It's probably because it is a little bit too quiet. So you can just turn the gain up rather than starting to turn sends up for me. You can just turn the gain up, and then everybody else gets a little bit more bass, and it's all relative. As I say, it's not 100% that's how it goes, but it's a really good starting place. And I find you stop people, you stop like the whole room looking at you and going, oh, I want that, because they've already got it. And that, which means you can concentrate on the people who do want something slightly different, rather than the whole room going, oh, can I have this? Yeah, that's that. I've been doing that for a while now, and it works. I know I stole it off other people, and it works for them. So.
I have heard that before, but another really good monitor engineer said the same thing. So it's definitely something I will be doing in future as well. We've got a question here from Megan, who said, if you decide that the previous show's show file isn't great, what show file would you go back to? So do you have like a sort of master starting point that you would go back to, or would you just, maybe, if I'm understanding this question right, just go back like 2, or maybe you would focus on tweaking the show file from the night before?
So what I generally do is, so if you leave rehearsals, I'll just build with it, because if you've only done 1 or 2 shows on something, it's going to need work anyway. If you're in a general, if you're like midway through a tour, I try and ask myself why I don't think that why that show wasn't very good. Like, you know, if the venue sounded like shit, you're going to have done some more, some harder EQing, had to do different things to people's mixes to make it work for that room. So there's no point carrying that on, because you know it's not going to work. If you've done extreme things, you know it's not going to work for the next room. If you've gone from like a 700 cat club to an arena, and then back again to another 700 cat club, the two extremes, they're too different. So you know it's not going to work, because unless it's a particularly dead arena or a particularly live small club. So it's just about like just being sensible and like looking at what you're doing. It's like sometimes the show was bad because the band were tired, and like when you're tired, your hearing suffers. You know, if you're turning the top end up on everything, it's probably because they're knackered. Yeah, it's like, and you don't want to continue that. You need to be really analytical of what you're doing and why you're doing it. As I say, sometimes it's just like, do you know what, band were knackered and they didn't play very well, and that's just what it was. So I won't use that one. I'll use the night before, because they were fine the night before. You know, sometimes if you go through a load of shows and done minimal changes, and then you do loads, just go to the one that the end of that run of doing very little. You'll soon find out in soundcheck if it was any good or not, you know. And especially if you've been doing it, you know, going on tour with the same show file for 3 weeks, you know, you can always get yourself back usually. As I say, it's just better not to, if you've done a load of really bad EQing to solve that really horrible room, there's no point using it, because you're only going to have to work really hard to get back to a place where it was good. So you might as well just ditch it and go from the night before. I never like jump back 2 weeks. It's always like a couple of nights.
Do you have a way you organise all your show files? Do you sort of label them up with the location or the date?
Yeah, so everything gets labelled with the venue, and if I don't know the venue, what kind of venue it is. So like, I don't know, like Arena A in Manchester, and then the next night, if we've gone to America and we're all of a sudden doing a shed outside with a really bad corrugated iron roof, then I'll just put a little bit of detail into stuff so that I know that next, you know, if it's relevant, I'll go back to that show file. And I always try and name the multi-track that I've done of that show the same, so that I can listen to the show file with the same multi-track, so that if you've done any gain changes or anything else that will have affected the multi-track, they match. I mean, as I say, sometimes I just ditch the show file, so it doesn't matter. But,
that's great. I like the fact that you don't know what the name of the venue you're in. I think that's brilliant. So Daniela's asking, how do you deal with ambient mics? Do you have an approach that you always use, or have you experimented with different setups?
Yeah, I'm kind of going through this process, like recently, over like the last couple of years, of just trying different things. I generally, depending on the size of the venue, well, it's more depending on how wide the venue is. So if you've got like just a square stage with the audience in front of you, I'll use less microphones. But I always try and put a pair of shotgun mics out, and I'll kind of aim them like basically like 3 or 4 foot above the average height of the audience, kind of vaguely pointing inwards. So that I get like that general atmosphere of the audience. And I'll put like a pair of any reasonable microphones, anything from like a 58 to a pair of 414s in the center, to get that kind of like general chat, but I'll aim them a little bit so that the audience is off axis, so slightly high. So you don't get, you know, mate and her boyfriend in the front row arguing, because you don't want that kind of like definite conversation. You just want like a general idea of conversation. And then depending on how wide your audience is, I'll just try and stagger, maybe like if you're in a really wide arena like MEN in Manchester, or like I'll try and kind of do like a pair of shotgun, like one shotgun either side, really far left and right, one kind of slightly further in, and then the center pair, and then pan them so that it represents, if you stood in the center of the stage, it represents what you've got. But I'd have more of the shotgun than the center, because you want, like, people I find in general want to hear that like atmospheric thing rather than just people clapping. Some, obviously everybody's different and some artists want different things, but in general I try and achieve that. But I've been, as I say, trying different microphones here and there to see what I can find something that's good. But one thing I would say is, like, I've seen on so many like random things on the internet, because I'll just use any microphone. It's like the audience are no less important than any other instrument you're trying to reproduce. Like, if you put a bad microphone in front of it, you're just going to get a bad source. Like, it's, you know, like if people want to hear the audience in their mix, then you should make it as good as you can get it, because that's what they were asking for. Why you belittle it, I don't understand. But
Okay,
But
so you
if you
think it's
work,
good to invest in your audience mics then?
yeah. Like, it's like, especially because it could be the most important thing you're doing. Like if you've got like a reasonable band with a singer, and the singer is really reliant emotionally on that response from your audience mic's the most important microphone there as a monitor engineer, because that's what's keeping you in work. Right, because especially because you've got to have a good relationship with your front of house person, and a lot of the time I find it's led by mic choices are led by them, so you might not always get your choice. But yeah, for those things, for those particular artists that like a kind of an audience response, it could be the most important thing you're doing. So you should invest in a good pair of shotguns or whatever you choose to use. As I say, it can be the thing that keeps you a job.
That's really cool. It's really interesting. Sophie's asking, what's one skill that you wish you'd learned earlier in your career, or something you wish every tech you worked with knew?
I always wish I'd done like an electrical engineering course. So I understood what was going on better in a really technical sense. Like if you understand how a microphone preamp is actually making something louder, then you'll be able to use it better. Same with like once you get into stuff like how an EQ reacts with phase and what you're doing, not just in a frequency sense, but in a phase sense, it all becomes a little bit easier because you know why something sounds like it is. It's not just because you turned a knob and it turned up. Like other things are happening. And power is something that's really important. The amount of times I've seen people blow stuff up because they don't understand power, which obviously can destroy your show. And people tend to get quite annoyed when they can't do that. It's like I was saying, like a reasonable multimeter is really important, because if you don't understand what's going on with your power, there's no point plugging anything else in, because it can easily just break everything and easily stop your show ever happening. So yeah, power and general electrical engineering would be something I wish I'd have gone to uni. I mean, I was awful academically, so it wouldn't have happened when I was 18, but with hindsight, it would have been useful.
Okay, well, I don't think it's ever too late to learn these things.
No.
But yeah. So Kathleen is asking, do you have any ribbon mics in your arsenal? If so, do you use / place them anywhere in particular, and any fun facts? Ribbon mics isn't something we usually see that often in live, but I don't know. Do you have any experience?
I don't own any. Saying that, I don't own a lot, so that doesn't really say anything. On a few gigs I've used Royers ribbons, like 122s or 121s on guitars. It's a good guitar mic. I think it's a bit of a myth that they're as delicate as they used to be. Like, I wouldn't take a pair of Coles out, but they are 50 odd years old. A brand new Royer 122 with you can't just chop them around, but like they're pretty hardy. And as long as you look after them, they'll behave. They'll be fine. I like them on guitars. I've not done it recently, but I've sometimes used them as overheads. If you like in bigger venues where you haven't got a ceiling that's like 4 foot above you, like a kind of mono drum overhead, they're pretty good at. Essentially, you just got to know your polar patterns and know what you can't stick a figure of 8 microphone and then point the back end at something loud. It's just, you can't do that. But there's no reason why you can't use ribbons, especially with stuff like guitar amps, because I don't believe there's a guitarist born that doesn't like their guitar amp loud.
Okay, great answer. Elle is asking, how much say do you have in choosing Dua's vocal mic? Is it you, the front of house engineer, or a decision between the both of you?
It's a decision between both of us. I mean, it doesn't matter who the artist is particularly. If you have the luxury of time, you know, I'd always get like a number of different mics in and find out what makes them the most comfortable. I've never had that opportunity personally, but yeah, it's usually a bit of both. It kind of depends on what you're doing. Like, if I was mixing wedges for a rock band, then I'd be the one kind of forcing my opinion. I tend, unless it's really bad, I tend not to worry about it because you know, the front of house person should be good enough to pick a good vocal mic. As I say, unless I think it's a really bad decision, but there's a lot of good mics out there. The worst thing generally you're going to have is that it just doesn't suit their voice particularly well. And if you're working at a reasonable level with a reasonably new microphone, you should be fine. But everything's a compromise because you're both having to deal with it. So it's only with wedges and feedback that I'm particularly fussy about it. No.
Okay. And do you mind telling us what vocal mic you do use for Dua?
I can't because it doesn't exist yet.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. But there is loads of good stuff. Like, I'm a big fan of DPAs. I can't remember, De Facto, that's what it's called. De Facto is a great mic. They do like a couple of versions, and you can kind of pick one's more linear and one's got like a little bit of top end bump. Like, they're really good, but anything from a 58 to there's just loads of really good ones, but they'll suit certain vocals. I think DPAs are really good on a lot of different like styles of vocal. But similarly, so are 58s. But I just think if you want a really kind of like polished sound, I'd always try a DPA first.
Okay, so I'm just going to sort of wrap this up with a couple more questions, two from me at the end. But Lauren has asked, we kind of covered this earlier. She's asked, how do you deal with difficult problems which happen during the gig, and what are your strategies to keep calm when this happens? I know you were saying that you believe in honesty and being transparent with your artists, but maybe a little bit more on how you keep calm. Any like strategies you have to kind of not panic and you know, infect everyone else around you with that panic?
Sometimes it's just good to close your eyes and take a deep breath, because it stops you. Like, if you close your eyes, it stops you seeing the things going on, and sometimes you just need 15 seconds to like reset yourself and just be like, right, okay, what is going on? And then you can go ahead and concentrate on what's happening. It kind of depends what's happening. Like, if it's like a technical thing that's broken, you've got to make, it's kind of easier than an emotional, well, it is easier than an emotional thing, because things are either fixable or they're not. And the longer, obviously, the more experience you have, the quicker you will know if something's fixable or not. And it's kind of having the strength of character to, and I'm not saying this is easy, because it takes years and none of us will get there. But, you know, having the strength of character to know when, do you know what, you've got to stop everything, or whether something's just not that important. It helps having a good tour manager and production manager, or, you know, they're the same person, to be like, well, this is happening, might need to stop the show, might not, you know. Like, I did a Glastonbury years ago, like probably like 2014 or something like that, and front of house desk crashed, like third song in or something like that, and the weather was really bad, and there was lightning kind of 10-15 miles away or so, and various countries have differing laws, but basically if lightning hits ground within a certain area of where you're performing, like your gigs off, like you've got to stop, you've got to turn all your distros off, and like clear stages and stuff. So it kind of, the front of house desk crashed, and then people started saying, oh, we might have to pull this because there's weather coming in. And it was like one of those moments, like, do I tell my production manager to pull the band off stage because front of house is off, nobody can hear anything? Or do you know, like, you've got to kind of take a moment to work out what you're going to say before you're doing it. And what makes that difficult is when people are in your face going, what's going on? Sometimes it's just time to say, do you want to all go away and I'll give you answers in a second. Obviously it's easy to say that as a 36-year-old. When I was 20, obviously I wasn't that confident. I didn't have that much experience. So it's kind of, yeah, it's having the confidence to either tell people to give you a bit of space in a polite and friendly way, because if you do it in an aggressive way, it just doesn't work. But you know, it's finding the moments to give yourself time to work out what's going on, or at least give yourself time to make a decision to give you more time. You know, emotional things, it is what it is. You've sometimes just got to keep a clean face and just accept whatever's happening, and then kind of go, cool, let's go on. Because the heat of the moment, some people are less pleasant than they possibly could be, and sometimes it's easier to let them get that out of their system and then carry on and it'll all be forgotten than try and do something and make it worse. But as I say, like the emotional side of dealing with people, that's like it's always hard.
Yeah, but you don't get that problem at front of house so much, I guess.
Yeah, that's kind of why I don't like doing front of house, because I don't mind dealing with people on a one-to-one basis. I'm fine with that, and you kind of know where you stand because you know who you're talking to. I always found it really difficult dealing with all the people that, I suppose in an arrogant way, you don't believe have an opinion. Like, and it's like when you're dealing with the artists, they have every right to have an opinion because it's their work. And saying, you know, band members, they have every right to have an opinion. Whereas when you're at front of house and you've got everybody from the lawyer that works for the management company to somebody else giving you an opinion, which might not be, I find it really difficult to be in that situation. So that is one of the reasons I don't do front of house very often. It's because I don't like that political side of it, whereas I can deal with the political side of Monix.
Yeah, I understand completely. So I'm just gonna kind of wrap this up with two last questions. One of them is, what advice do you have for someone who's interested in becoming a monitor engineer?
I think the best thing, like from an audio engineering standpoint, it's like you need to be quick, because it's much easier emotionally to get something done really quickly, even if it's a little bit rough, than having people standing over you going, you're going to get this done. And it's like I was saying about having like a pre-mix set up for people. Like, whilst it's easier professionally to do that, well, I find anyway, it also stops musicians kind of being like, I can't hear anything. You know, that kind of like blunt in a room full of people calling you out, basically. So practicing is like you were saying about getting multi-tracks, which you can download off the internet of all sorts, and just practicing, like listening to stuff and practicing listening. Because if the better you are at it, the quicker you will be, and therefore it always gives you more time, basically. Because once you suppress and keep people happy, you can then go back and do the detailed stuff and make stuff really cool. Yeah, it's practice, basically. Being like music, it's like I'm into this because I like music. As I know we all love music, so like listen to music, listen to records. You know, as I say, download multi-tracks, play with stuff. And this is like a general engineering thing, I think. But like, I just think it helps to be really quick and like learn desks. You know, like I haven't had the opportunity like recently because I've been busy, but like when I first started at Bit Row, every lunchtime I'd tip a board and learn how to use it. And the one, like, you know, this stuff that you get a gig with some little band doing festivals, you know you're going to see a Yamaha CL5, you're going to see an Avid Profile, you know, Yamaha PM5. You're going to see these desks, so you should learn how to use them. I don't think it's an excuse not to know how to use a professional mixing console as an audio engineer, because that's literally what you're paid to do, regardless of the level you're working at. You know, and because you know it, you can also decide whether it's suitable for the thing you're doing, rather than walking into the gig and not finding out that you actually can't do your gig on it for a technical reason. You know, so yeah, learn how to use desks and get as quick as you can at doing things like EQ and compression and stuff. Yeah.
Good advice. Yeah, that's really great. My last question is a little bit more kind of personal, a little bit more deep, and it's kind of predictably, how are you handling this COVID-19 crisis we're going through? Do you have any backup plan? I know Dua's tour obviously got pulled. Was that hard for you to deal with initially? Are you know, is it just water for ducks back, or yeah?
So it's obviously better to know that you've got work. Right? Personally, we were in rehearsals when this happened, and when it was made clear that, you know, this wasn't going to be a thing, me and my partner I got home, me and my partner kind of had a discussion. Ironically, she quit work because I was going to be really busy for X amount of time. So she's gone back to work part-time so that I can spend time at home, kind of being the main caregiver to our kids. And we've just kind of working out what's going on, really. And it's kind of, you've got to see the best of it. Like, I'm lucky in the sense that, you know, like, I've got kids that keep me busy every day, because obviously I'm not homeschooling them. I've got a garden. I live, like, you know, I can walk 30 seconds from my house and be in the countryside. So I'm in a really good position for this to be happening. As far as like further, how long this goes on for, it's kind of one of those things. It's like, it's a conversation between me and my partner, because it's obviously not just about me. So we are discussing about how long we leave it till I go do other work. And it's kind of, it's that balancing act between the necessity to earn money and the necessity for me to spend time with my wife and kids, because there's no point like earning a load of money, not that I can earn a load of money, but earning money, not seeing my children and my wife for the next 6 months, and then going on tour for 3 years where I'll see them 2 weeks every 10 weeks type of thing. So there's like, it's a balancing act about where you are in your life and what you need to do. As I say, like, we're kind of okay because my wife can work, and that brings in some money. So until we work out that this ain't happening, you know, like, I personally can see stuff starting to happen in September, not gigs, but like the kind of work that the likes of me and you could do, like telly and stuff like that, corporate kind of stuff. So there is work within our field that will potentially start happening before we can go out and do shows. I mean, don't get me wrong, I hope that all the stuff that's booked, because there's gigs booked in October, like, you know, like Liam Gallagher's doing an HS thing in the O2 in October. Whether that'll happen or not, I've no idea, but kind of reassessing our goals has been really, really important. You know, like every couple of weeks, just working out what is actually going on and what we can predict is going to happen. But as I say, I'm hoping that the stuff that I've got booked in for January obviously happens, because the best part of a year and not working is not good. I certainly can't afford to do that, but but it's not just about making money, is it? It's like the life that we all live, and the consequences of all of this is just more than just not working.
Yeah, I agree. I think a sort of upside to this pandemic is that we've all had a sort of time to slow down and reflect and kind of think a little bit more about our lives. And, you know, we're not so busy rushing around earning money, and, you know, we can start seeing, you know, prioritizing different things, I suppose.
Yeah, totally. And like, don't get me wrong, like, if I'm, you know, this like government self-employed thing, if it wasn't for that happening at some point, hopefully, like, I'd be totally screwed. It's only because I'm in the position where I can scrape my savings out for a couple more weeks to wait for that money to come in. I mean, it's also a lesson in being self-employed. It's like, you know, you've been self-employed long enough as well. It's like, if you've got to expect that you're not going to work for a bit of time, and it's something that's obviously you don't want it to happen, but it's certainly, I've been self-employed for 18 odd years or so, 17 years or whatever. I've definitely been unemployed for 3 months before, like a number of times. So, and scraped by eating pasta every day because I bought one big bag of it, you know. It's like, it's just, thankfully, my monthly outgoings are relatively low, and I can scrape out by not spending any money. But as I say, if it wasn't for the hopeful money that I'll get off the government, like, I'd be screwed.
Well, fingers crossed. And it's good to know that, you know, you've had practice, and, you know, I think you're up there doing pretty well, but you're also down here in the gutter with us as well.
Well, this is kind of one of those things. It's like, you get good gigs, and then you get good gigs in what people think are good gigs, right? But there's plenty of bands that are touring, maybe not plenty, but there's enough bands touring what you would think are, maybe some people would say is mediocre, but they pay really well, they look after you, you know, like, the height of your career isn't necessarily like X artist selling out arenas everywhere. Like, don't get me wrong, this is a generalization, but, you know, like, I worked for I used to, for Brit Row, I worked for Left Field, like, when they came back, and they were lovely people that looked after everybody, and most people like younger than me couldn't care less who they were, but they looked after us. They were really nice. I'd much rather work for like an artist that's really pleasant and like looks after you than, I don't know, whoever, Rolling Stones or whatever. Not that I'm saying the Rolling Stones are bad people, but, you know, the big artists or whatever. Yeah.
I totally agree. I think that's a really nice kind of tone to end on, actually. So thank you so much for sharing all your experiences and answering all these questions. And thank you for everyone who's participated in joining this webinar. We are doing these every Monday. So next Monday, same time, we are going to be doing a webinar Q&A with lighting designer Annie Klitmer. She's going to be talking about all her experience. And then the week after, we're going to be doing a Q&A all about festival organisation. So yeah, I hope you can join in more of these, and keep busy, keep learning, and hopefully we'll see you soon in a field somewhere or in a venue. Yeah, thanks again, Alex.